Today on Podio Commentary, we're going to be breaking down probably the biggest box office bomb of the year, in 2024 at least, and a movie that I didn't think was that bad, nor do I think that it's entirely deserving of the hate that it's getting. And right now, I'm talking about Borderlands, the new video game adaptation from director Eli Roth. And it's a movie, folks, that is really not doing well. I mean, the internet doesn't seem to like it. Reddit doesn't seem to like it. Critics don't seem to like it. And the movie is not off to a great start. However, I do think that it will ultimately find a home on home video, on VOD, with an audience of people that will finally get around to watching it and going, oh, yeah, okay, it's not as bad as everyone led me to believe. It's one of the reasons why you don't really trust critics or anything like that. Again, everything I say on this show on Podio Commentary is really all about just, hey, these are my thoughts. These are my opinions. This is what I like about this movie, what I don't like about this movie. But either way, I want to give you guys a fair amount of information so you can make up your own dang mind. So if you've been on the fence about this movie, if you don't know what to think about this movie, I'm going to be spoiling everything, obviously, as we go through this. But at the same time, I'm going to start off by talking about how the movie came to be, because I always feel like that's a good way to kind of start this. But if you just simply do not know what Borderlands is, it's a science fiction action comedy co-written and directed by Eli Roth. It's based on the video game series by Gearbox Software, and Cate Blanchett stars as Lilith. Kevin Hart stars as Roland. Jack Black plays Claptrap. Ariana Greenblatt plays Tina, aka Tiny Tina, but they don't want to say the name for some reason. Florian Montieu, if I'm saying that wrong, is playing Krieg, the Psycho. Gina Gershon is playing Moxie. And of course, Jamie Lee Curtis as Professor Tannis. So they do use a lot of the characters from the games. I actually had to go and look all this up getting ready to record this thing, because I was a little bit like on the shocked side at the response that the movie was getting. I always thought like Borderlands has a diehard set of fans. This is kind of a wacky, zany, out there type movie that is coming towards the end of summer. And sometimes they can find themselves in a position to kind of do really well. The problem, and I'm just going to be honest right off the bat, the problem with this movie is that the editing is a little rough at times. The pacing can get a little bit weird. I love the character dynamics. I like the action scenes. It needed to be rated R. It just absolutely needed to be rated R. The fact that it's not rated R is a big issue. It's a big problem. They shouldn't have done it. It's bad. Because being rated PG-13, okay, so I got to go back. To explain this, I got to kind of go backwards, right? So when Borderlands 1 came out in 2009, it was definitely irreverent. It was definitely odd. The gameplay was a lot of fun. The billions of guns combinations you could get. The story was okay. But a lot of people kind of took to it because, for one, its art style, two, it was just different. It was just a different vibe at the time. But then when Borderlands 2 came out a couple years later, that is when it ratcheted it up to like a 10 for a lot of gamers. Because it was Anthony Birch wrote the game. His sister, Ashley Birch, played Tiny Tina. She voiced Tiny. There's a whole thing with that. That's a whole other topic of conversation. But anyway, Anthony Birch, when he wrote the game, largely was focusing on it from the perspective of what the internet wants to see in a game like this. It was essentially irreverent meme humor. It was almost as if Reddit made the video game, right? In fact, there's actually been a lot of people that have said that Borderlands 2 and 3 and even the first one were basically just Reddit the video game. A lot of memes, a lot of one-liners, a lot of just oddball humor. I mean, that's really the market that they're going for. And I don't think that market is out of grasp in 2024. I think people are like dying to get their hands on some of that irreverent, just kind of like naughty, juvenile humor. And this movie had an opportunity to do that. But the downside is that they just simply didn't do that. They chose a safe path. Now, I don't know if this was because Avi Arad and his son Ari Arad were the ones producing it, and they just wanted to go PG-13 because they did Spider-Man, they did Uncharted. In fact, that's even what's on the poster. It's like from the producer of Spider-Man and from the producer of Uncharted, and like, oh wow, Uncharted's a video game adaptation. That was a fun movie. That was a fine movie. I'm going to do a Podio commentary on that too, and then they go, oh, but let's we're going to use that as a marketing tactic. But if you are a movie fan, if you are a film fan who likes nerd shit and you enjoy Spider-Man movies or comic book movies, or you just happen to know everything about Sony and how they've handled these movies, you come to realize, oh yeah, right, it's Avi Arad, the guy who put in a thank you to himself in the end credits of Spider-Man No Way Home, which many of us were like, okay, great, you can give yourself that pat on the back if you kindly F off, because everyone is tired of Avi Arad, and I feel like this particularly runs afoul of that. Now, there's also been the rumor that Craig Mazin, or Mazin, whatever his pronunciation is, the guy who is the showrunner on The Last of Us, he also did Chernobyl for HBO. He wrote a script, and apparently it was a good script, but he also was like looking at how this thing was turning out and then wanted to get his name removed from it. And that's kind of funny. Actually, here I can give you guys a bit of background. So the film was first announced in August of 2015. So like 9 damn years ago, with Lionsgate developing it, with Ari and Avi Arad producing. Initially, Leigh Whannell, the co-creator of Saw, director of Upgrade and The Invisible Man, was in talks to direct. Then fast forward a couple years, by February 2020, Eric Feig had joined as a producer, and Eli Roth was attached to direct from a screenplay written by Craig Mazin. And again, he wrote the initial script, and then that just ended up kind of, faulting. And then Eli Roth came in and co-wrote it with Joe Crombie. Now, Eli Roth directed the movie in 2021. They shot it in Budapest in Hungary during the COVID pandemic. So it only shot for a couple of weeks. Then there was a couple of weeks of reshoots that were directed in early 2023 by Tim Miller. And this is because Eli Roth was committed to doing the Thanksgiving movie and he wasn't able to work on it. Now, the thing with that is that what you have is, I'm sorry. Oh, I just want to quickly correct something here. Craig Mazin did have his name removed from the project and was replaced by Joe Crombie. What I'm wondering here is if Joe Crombie is just the pen name, right? Because the success of The Last of Us and how well it was written, directed, acted, everything, that show is amazing. I even have the first season on 4K. I don't buy a lot of TV shows, but I have that one on 4K. I can see that he probably wanted to get his name off of that because this movie was probably destined to bomb and he didn't want to have that tied around him like a freaking albatross around his neck. I completely, totally understand that. However, it's really not that bad of a movie. It's just really not that bad of a movie. It's so kind of dumb to me to get so worked up over it that you just want your name taken off it. But I just feel like the way Hollywood is these days, if you're on a high pedigree show that like won a bunch of awards and you were highly, regarded and there's all the accolades and everything else, you probably don't want to have something like this show up right next to your name. And I honestly feel like even if I was a writer, and I am a writer, I'm a creative, I would look at everything and just go, yeah, like, fuck it. My name's right there. Like, just, what, good, bad, or the other, man. Like, let's roll. But the thing I want to talk about, though, is with the reshoots with Tim Miller. For those of you who don't know who Tim Miller is, he directed Deadpool. He is a visual effects artist. He has his own studio. He did a bunch of video game trailers. Like if you ever saw the Batman Arkham Origins game, the trailer with Batman versus Deathstroke, that he directed that. Like that's an excellent thing. Like when he went on to go do Deadpool, he brought a lot of heart and a lot of love to that movie. And I feel like when he left Deadpool 2 and David Leitch took over, David Leitch didn't bring a lot of that heart. And Sean Levy brought the heart back for Deadpool and Wolverine, and that's now a $1 billion movie. So again, heart goes a long way. And I want to know the scenes that Tim Miller himself directed, because there are some scenes in this movie that do have a fair amount of heart. And I don't necessarily see Eli Roth being that guy. You know what I mean? Like, not that he's a bad director, but he's not that guy. You don't go to Eli Roth and be like, hey, man, I need to have an emotionally pivotal scene between my two lead characters that's really going to cement the emotional arc of the movie and lead us into the next act. We need to have them conflict, but still on the tail end of that, feel a certain way towards each other. I'm going to need those looks. I'm going to need those glances, those feelings, those vibes. You don't go to Eli Roth for that. You're like, hey, Eli Roth, I need a flesh-eating virus to peel back people's skin. Or what I need is for you to make a movie about a bunch of Eastern Europeans killing tourists, which ultimately pissed off the Ukrainian government because of how people then started thinking about traveling to Ukraine. The Hostel movies, man. Holy shit. Gotta love them. Anyway, the movie went through its own thing. Okay, it really did. And ultimately, I feel like this movie is just kind of a mishmash of studio interference, COVID problems, things along those lines. And you can kind of tell because like the movie is just getting bombarded. It cost $110 to $120 million to produce Lionsgate, spent $30 million on advertising. But here's the thing with this though. Okay, here's where things get weird. According to an insider, and this is something is really difficult to find the information on, okay? But this was coming in through Deadline Hollywood. So it wasn't just like they didn't have any connections. They said that international pre-sales reportedly, according to studio insiders, I'm assuming at Lionsgate, covered 60% of the production costs. However, here's what the pre-sale stuff is. Okay. It's not ticket sales. And that's what a lot of people thought, that it was ticket sales. Because the movie only did 8 million domestic and another 8 million worldwide. It's like $16 million against a $120 million budget. It's not going to do much better than that. But the pre-sale aspect of it is them selling it to foreign markets. To give you guys an idea, Kevin Smith, whenever he does a movie, well, he's working with like Saban now and Lionsgate, so he's got financing that's a little bit better than what he had before. But anyway, my point is that when Kevin Smith was financing like Red State and Tusk, and I forget the other, like Yoga Hosers or whatever the ones he did, he would pre-sell in order to foreign markets in order to finance his movie. So if he wanted $4 million for the budget, he would pre-sell to international markets and get the money that way. You know, and that's a smart way of doing it. So in this particular case, international pre-sales brought them 60% of their budget back. Lionsgate can write off the $30 million spent on marketing. And like I said at the beginning of this, I feel that a lot of people are going to end up really coming to this movie down the road. Is it ever going to be seen as like a classic? No, but it could be seen as a cult classic. I could see people really vibing with this, but just not right now, because everything in theaters right now is basically Deadpool and Wolverine. And that ends up being a big problem. So it's pretty bad. Interestingly enough, over the course of the weekend with this film coming out, Borderlands 3 on Steam, its player base rose from about 6,000 people to 12,000. So that means that like people saw the movie and then people went back to play Borderlands, and that could end up being something that does this thing. So anyway, let's talk about the movie itself before I dive in the box office and everything else, because the critical response is not good. We already know it's not good. The movie has not made a lot of money, so there's really no point. So let's talk about the film. Okay, so the movie kind of gives you this like a bit of a cold open, Lilith giving a monologue about Pandora and the vault and you know, the Iridians, and the daughter of Iridia is going to be the one to open the vault and everything else. And then it cuts to an Atlas spaceship, and here comes Roland trying to rescue Tina. And I mean, it's blatantly like a Luke meets Leia for the first time. Oh, aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper, or a little small to be a stormtrooper, or whatever the line is, you know? And he comes in, he's got a helmet on and he takes it off, and, you know, it kind of makes a joke about it. What cracked me up about that, there's even a line later on where Kevin Hart makes a comment about stormtroopers. So this movie clearly understands and references its inspiration. And I think that's absolutely okay. And that should tell you right off the bat, do not take this seriously. This is not a serious type of movie. This is something that has, piss dragons and all sorts of shit. The movie didn't lean into the weirdness of Pandora as much as it should have. It did a little bit. They were hoping to open it up for a cinematic universe, by the way. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would love it if they actually did. After watching this, I kind of want to go watch it again now that I'm talking about it. But anyway, as they're getting off the ship, this is where they run into Krieg, a psycho, who is institutionalized on the same ship. He just breaks out and they're like, hey, what's up? What's up? All right, let's go. Like, you're with us. Like, now we have half the team together. Let's roll. And they break out and they then head down to Pandora. But then we end up going to another planet where we meet Lilith, who is currently trying to turn in a bounty, stomps off at the bar to get a drink. And this is where she ends up meeting Atlas, who is Tina's father, who wants her to go and retrieve his child because she's been kidnapped by one of the men who was supposed to protect her. Now, what we don't know, and what we never really learned in the movie, by the way, is why Roland broke Tina out. Maybe he wanted to open the vault. Maybe he didn't. There's really not a lot of backstory there, and I would have loved to have seen more backstory. I think that's maybe one of the problems with some of the brisk pacing and some of the editing is just kind of like there's a story there that they kind of cut around, especially with, I believe it's Commander Knox, played by Janina Gavankar. And so there's a whole thing with them on that one. There's a little bit of a backstory, but we never really get that, unfortunately. That part sucks. I hate when they establish that kind of stuff in a movie, but we never really get more of that info. It's one of the reasons why I think I kind of liked Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, the director's cut, as much as I did, because I felt like even if the movie is a little slower paced and whatnot, it moved quickly and you got a lot of lore. You got a lot of story. Story in these movies do, in fact, matter despite the runtime you're trying to go for, which, by the way, is only like 102 minutes. It's like 90 minutes before the end credits. So it's a short, easy watch of a film. Anyway, what I liked about the scene where we get to meet Lilith is obviously Cate Blanchett is playing her very kind of stoically, very kind of much like a, she's just got that like rough and tumble scoundrel attitude, and it serves her very well. But when she's at the bar, she gets approached by one of Atlas's goons and his guys, and she ends up like killing them. And then another guy appears as Atlas. But what we find, she shoots him, and then we find out that he's got like a hologram mask on. And it's a really cool mask technology. I thought that was really cool because then he makes the other guy, who's like a bigger guy, put on the mask, and then it becomes Edgar Ramirez's face, but it's stretched to that guy. And I just thought that was kind of funny because it's like, okay, cool. Like it wasn't just modeled after one person. And that's kind of what we see is it literally stretches itself to the face of the wearer. And of course, from there, he ends up paying her a lot of money to go to Pandora and to save Tina. So she goes to Pandora and she ends up seeing a skag, like the only skag shot in the movie, unfortunately. And then she meets Claptrap. And he was mysteriously programmed to help her, like to wait for her on Pandora. But she doesn't know why, and he doesn't know why. And I just got to say, Jack Black, coming from Bowser going over to this, I mean, Jack Black is probably worth the price of admission, in my opinion. Claptrap is always a fun character. I've always loved Claptrap in the video games. So him here was great. There's a lot of great lines. He's always talking a ton of shit, telling everyone like, oh, I hope you all die horrible, painful ways, but I can't not help you, sort of thing. And it's like this reluctant sidekick character. And he's great. It's Claptrap. You cannot not love Claptrap. So Lilith uses him to track down Tina to some quarry somewhere that's like 147 days away from where they are. Keep in mind, they've been there for a couple months already, but we also really don't know what they're up to. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of the whole point, right? So they go and they find Tina. She's got all the explosives. She's throwing, all these explodable stuffed animals at Lilith. And Ariana Greenblatt, I love, she's having so much fun playing this character. She's having so much fun. Whereas like you watch Barbie and she was kind of like I'm a teenager, like that whole thing. And even Ahsoka, right? She was still kind of stoic as Ahsoka, as Yips. But here she was just able to just kind of let it loose and do her thing. And I think that's great. I always love it when the actors get to have a lot of fun. Plus her relationship with Krieg is almost to some extent like a Master Blaster type situation from Beyond Thunderdome, right? Or Sloth and Chunk. Maybe that's a bit of a better way to describe it. I don't know, but that's kind of what it feels like to me. It's a little bit of Sloth and Chunk there. Because Krieg is very much just like he's going to protect her, he's going to fight, do all those things, but he doesn't get a lot of character, but he doesn't really need it. He's there for a purpose. You know why he's there for a purpose. But as they're, waiting to get, here comes Kevin Hart's character Roland, and they all kind of get together and they're attacked by the Crimson Lance, which is the private army of Atlas. This is where Commander Knox shows up. And she's like, just give me the kid and blah, 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 all that stuff. What I loved about this is that they end up going to this chase sequence through like this ravine, canal sort of thing. And, they're like, he's driving his truck. He slides the wheel over to Lilith in the passenger seat, tells her to drive. Well, he gets up and he gets on the Gatling gun and just starts opening fire on all of these Crimson Lance guys coming to kill him. And then Lilith is like, well, I got to get in the fight on this one too, because she ends up seeing that someone's going to be able to drop the ambush on Roland. So she slides the steering wheel in the center of the vehicle and tells Claptrap to drive. And then they're out there just kind of fighting all this stuff. And it's so, look, it's so over the top. The CG ain't perfect. Obviously there's issues, but I did not care. I did not care. I was having fun. I was just sitting there watching the movie, just big old dumb smile on my face, like having a good time watching it. So once they get through all that, then they go into like the piss gardens of this like piss dragon thing. And you've seen the scene in the trailer when they're like, roll up the window, and it ends up like splashing piss inside of the vehicle. You've seen that in the preview. And then of course we see the escape of him like jumping off a ramp, firing missiles into the mouth of this dragon creature thing, and then, blowing at the back of its head out while they jump through. That's probably like the biggest like CG action scene, like the biggest explosion in the movie, so to speak. But what I enjoyed about all of that is just like, it was something unique. It was just kind of goofy. It was just weird science fiction. Just, okay, cool. Like, let's roll with this thing. So then they end up going and talking to Mad Moxie because they need help finding the other key to the vault. And that is when we end up seeing Gina Gershon as Moxie. And look, Gina Gershon has the look of Moxie, but Mad Moxie, she's a fan favorite. A lot of dudes like to fap and the do cut to her. Again, if you know that reference, you've played Borderlands too. And she did, I don't know, she was like in it, but like I don't know if she really knew what she was doing. I didn't really vibe on Gina Gershon as Mad Moxie. Had the look, had the tattoo in the right spot. I don't know, not the best. But what was fascinating about that was, she's talking with Lilith and she's talking about her mom, and Lilith clearly doesn't like Pandora. So we're getting a little bit more of the story. And then Moxie sends them to go and meet with Tanis, who is basically like Lilith's foster mom. At first, when you get there, you almost think that Jamie Lee Curtis is Lilith's mom, because she is significantly older than her and could easily be her mom. But what I liked about Jamie Lee Curtis in this role is that she like was autistic, and she wasn't her normal self. She was very kind of, scatterbrained, but focused. And she knew, this is what she's working on. And she left Lilith with a whole bunch of murderers and thieves because she felt that that would be better for Lilith than hanging out with her while she went back to Pandora to continue her mom's research. And so there's this dynamic there, a frustration that kind of lasts, a scene or two. And then not that they kind of work through it, but they just kind of go, okay, we've established this, we know, but they still have a job to do, because at this point in time, Lilith is entirely screwed. She's entirely tied to Roland, Krieg, Tina, and everybody else, because even though she was paid a lot of money to bring Tina back to Atlas, well, at this point, basically she's kind of dead. So she knows that. So she has to kind of see this thing through to the end. And she starts having emotions and feelings towards Tina. largely because the two of them aren't that different, as we come to find out later on, because Tina is genetically manufactured. They found a little bit of the Iridian blood on a remnant, and Atlas was able to clone her in order to be able to open the vault. So all the other clones were dead. She's the only one that is functional, and that's why he wants her. And so, okay, now we're like getting into some, Island of Dr. Moreau type stuff. And it's like, there's a bit more backstory here. They don't dwell on it very much. But what was really funny was when they had to go get the other key and they come across all of these psychos and they send Claptrap out to just talk all this shit to distract them. And of course, Claptrap can't really die and everything else. But that's like, you see that in the trailer of them opening fire and him getting shot constantly. But then after that, Claptrap, like after they find the key and they're trying to get out of there, he starts just shitting bullets, right? He's just dumping lead. And that ends up attracting the psychos. And they get in this really massive firefight. And I thought that was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the action scene here because Krieg was kicking a whole bunch of butt. Roland was kicking a whole bunch of butt. In the trailer, you see a spot where Tanis steals a gun from Roland. Right. And she just like, oh, I needed a gun. He's like, yeah, well, you asked for it. Well, what's really funny is she's like trying to point the way to get out. And she ends up pointing the gun at a couple people accidentally and shooting them. So like, she's not thinking about pulling the trigger. She needs a gun to protect herself, but she's legitimately just trying to get them out of there. And I thought that was really funny because like, you can see she's just like, oh my God, I'm doing this. And she doesn't even really realize it's a little moment. It's a little moment that really plays into the character. That's what I liked about it. It was just little moments like that I really felt kind of sold the team dynamic. And Jamie Lee Curtis, much like Ariana Greenblatt, was having a really, really, really good time while filming this movie. You could tell because Jamie Lee Curtis is a big ass nerd. She's a huge ass nerd. So this is something, a playground sandbox that she just gets to kind of have a lot of fun with. Look, like Cate Blanchett was there to kind of chew the scenery, to be the main protagonist. And it's her journey that we're following. But the other ones just kind of get to exist and be crazy and be zany. It's part of the Borderlands, their idea. It's part of what they are. It's part of its branding, if you will. After that, Lilith decides that she doesn't want to turn Tina in. So she smashes the beacon that Claptrap had like just fixed. So Atlas sends this drone down to tell Lilith, like, I've been tracking you this whole time. Like nothing you do has not been something that I haven't known about, which makes a lot of sense considering the fact that this guy is a massive corporate conglomerate, a manufacturer of weaponry and defensive, like outfits and things like that, or whatever, defensive techniques. And so Tina overhears this and thinks that Lilith betrayed her. And obviously you have to have a moment in these movies where there is like that second act, but betrayal that is going to set the emotional core and lead us into the third act and the climax. And again, this movie's predictable. A lot of movies are predictable, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. It just doesn't mean that they're bad. They could still be a lot of fun to watch. And again, this is a lot of fun to watch. So she throws a grenade, knocks out Lilith. Everyone leaves. Roland, by the way, is fought all the psychos in the bottom part of the sewers, and he is very much on his own, trying to make his way to the vault to go find them. So, and that part was pretty cool because he did like the heroic sacrifice thing, but he is an elite soldier, so he just kind of kicked the crap out of everybody using one of Tiny Tina's exploding dolls named Bob. And I would have liked to have seen more of his journey on that front, also being alone. And it's kind of like, I wouldn't mind seeing a Roland-focused Borderlands movie, especially because, he's clearly got some backstory there. Like we kind of find out that there was, he had a relationship with Commander Knox. In his words, he ghosted her. But there's clearly a relationship there, and she's clearly mad at him for that. And that's one of her motivations for going and trying to capture him. But then when we get to Lilith waking up, she ends up going to a nearby village, and she recognizes the village because that's where she grew up. And inside her own home, Claptrap kind of senses that he's there, and he ends up R2D2ing a hologram message for her from her mom, because she always hated her mom for leaving her behind. She always hated her mom for abandoning her. What she didn't realize was that her mom was like, you're special. You are a daughter of Iridia. You're the Firehawk. She's the prophesized one. And her mother sent her away so that they would never open the vault. So now Lilith is aware of who she is and what she is to an extent, goes to the vault, tries to save everyone because Atlas is waiting for Lilith and Tanis and Krieg, and he's going to basically kill him. She shows up, she activates the vault, she becomes the Firehawk, and then we get into this big event, this massive CGI firefight sort of thing. But real quick, before I get into that one of the things that I liked, and again, going back to where there's story here that's cut out, is when Commander Knox is given the order to kill everyone, she chooses not to. She chooses to stay and defend Roland. And she says, you were right, I should have listened. And then out of the blue, she just gets murked from the spaceship. And I wasn't expecting that. That got me. And that went against the trope. The problem with that, though, again, is kind of she was a side character. She had a couple scenes in the movie. There's no emotional connection. We never got any backstory between her and Roland. I have a feeling that would have been more impactful if we would have gotten those scenes that I feel that they have shot. As well as all the blood, guts, gore, and swearing. So all of that stuff. A hard R. There's no not hard R. Hard F-bomb. There's no F-bombs in this movie, despite PG-13 films can do at least one. They didn't do it. They just didn't want to do it. And that part sucks because they should have done it. And so then Lilith and everyone, they're fighting, and she kind of goes full Super Saiyan. She ends up giving shields to everybody so they're impervious to damage. What I loved is when Roland gets that, he starts shooting at the psychos and the different Crimson Lance guys. And he's like, you get a bullet, you get a bullet, you get a bullet. I mean, again, that's something you would feel is from the games. Krieg, fights kind of another guy just like Krieg, and ultimately says, no one kills me but me, which is totally a line from the game. But then Atlas grabs Tina and does the whole hostage thing, forcing Lilith to take them into the vault. And when they get into the vault, there's nothing there. It's all Iridian technology, I guess. It's all their power, what it was that they were protecting, but we don't get any time in the vault. And then what I like, though, is that she's got all the power in there. And so he's got his personal armament, his personal shield that's going to protect him. And then she sneaks up behind him and whispers in his ear, freaking him out. But she takes the shield generator, giving Tina the opportunity to kick the shit out of Atlas, which she said she was going to do. Because she says, she's like, I'm going to go into that vault and I'm going to use whatever's in there to kill him, because he cloned her and he would murder her and he would just do it all again till he got what he wanted. And this is when some weird Cthulhu-esque octopus creature comes out of a chasm and just grabs Atlas and then drags him underground, and he's dead. And then it cuts to basically the ending of Return of the Jedi. Fireworks are going off at the city. This is what peace looks like. Yada, 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 yada. The ending is very abrupt. It's your standard typical ending, but it's very, very, very abrupt. And I just thought that was I'm like, okay, what does this mean? This is peace. Are they the only bad guys out there? Is the Crimson Lance the only bad guys out there? What about all the psychos that are psycho? What about all the other factions on Pandora? Now that the vault has been opened and supposedly shut, what does that mean? Does that mean that Lilith is now the protector of Pandora? I'm assuming. Is she going to adopt Tina? Yeah, it pretty much implies that. Is the team going to kind of stay together and go on more adventures? Yeah, sure. Probably not, given the response to the film, but that's the movie in a nutshell. And it's like, look, it wasn't bad. It had a lot of really fun moments. I had a lot of fun watching it. You know, it sucks that that it pulled in so little. Deadline is reporting that the film would likely lose the studio $20 to $30 million. Never mind, they also reported that 60% of its production budget was made back in international pre-sales. So, okay, I mean, if they've made back 60%, there's a lot of write-downs that they're going to be able to do. So I don't think the movie's going to lose them that much money. It's most likely going to end up being on Netflix here before the end of the year, or it's going to be on Amazon, or it's going to be on, who knows, maybe even Hulu, who knows where they're going to send it. But they're definitely going to send it somewhere. And I believe in my heart of hearts that once this movie ends up making it to a streaming service and people see it, the idea of it's going to change. And I say this because this happened with Solo back in 2018, right? So 6 years ago, when Solo came out, it not bombed, but it didn't like blow up the box office, largely because Deadpool 2 was competition. And a lot of people who were mad at The Last Jedi did not go and watch the movie. But when it hit Netflix by the end of the year, I had a ton of people hitting me up going like, oh my God, I just saw Solo. It was great. Now, am I going to get that for this? No, I'm not. I'm not going to get that for this. What I hope to get is people going like, yeah, it's not that bad. I'm hoping for a mediocre reception to it. How about that? And I say that because I personally enjoyed the film. I personally dug it for what they tried to do. I feel there's more that's there, and I'm hoping for an unrated director's cut. I feel at this point that would be the best course of action to get the movie more attention. Lean into what makes Borderlands, and do a thing. It's like when they're doing a BioShock movie that's supposedly coming to Netflix, and if they got rid of the whole "would you kindly" twist, I would revolt about that, right? So, I mean, fans are fans for a reason, and they have certain expectations. And I think this is going to be something that might reach them down the road. But I think people are also just apprehensive. You see the name Avi Arad, it doesn't necessarily make you get filled with confidence. However, again, I have hopes, not high hopes, but hopes that this movie finds an audience down the road. And that maybe, just maybe, it ends up making enough money to eke out a small profit. That's hardly. And then from there, we're able to get something like a sequel or a continuation or just more time spent in that world. And guess what? I would love to spend more time in that world. Maybe I'm the only one, and I'm totally okay with that. So this has been Podio Commentary. I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts and opinions. Let me know down in the comment section on YouTube. If you're listening to this on podcast form, audio form, please find me at Hwad Podcast on Twitter, HWAD Podcast on Twitter. And you guys can always interact with me there or on the YouTube page, youtube.com/3buck theater. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you again for listening. Have yourself a great day. Go see Borderlands. Let me know what you think. Goodbye, everyone.